Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. Now on to our headlines.
The third typhoon to hit the storm-battered Philippines in as many weeks caused major flooding in Manila on Thursday, trapping people on rooftops and claiming at least 2 lives in another part of the country.
Despite his hectic schedule due to the ongoing virtual plenary session of the 37th ASEAN Summit, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte conducted an aerial inspection of the areas hit by Typhoon Ulysses.
And U.S. President Donald Trump and President-elect Joe Biden attended separate Veterans Day events in a stark illustration of the chasm between the incoming and outgoing administrations.
And in San Antonio, the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, has reached out to give a helping hand to the less fortunate.
The third typhoon to hit the storm-battered Philippines in as many weeks caused major flooding in Manila on Thursday, trapping people on rooftops and claiming at least 2 lives in another part of the country. Typhoon Vanuatu packed winds of up to 155 kilometers per hour as it swept across the country's largest island of Luzon after making landfall overnight. Take a look.
Noon, pangalawa na ngayon. Hindi ko man nakalain na ganito pala ngayon. Kaya nakahiga lang kami mag-asawa. Tapos, sabi nung kapitbahay, nagkagulot. Tapos lumabas yung asawa ko, tinignan niya yung tubig. Hanggang dito na pala. Dali lang ko nang, ito lang damit ko dala.
Pinabayaan na ho namin yung gamit namin. Yung bata tapos talaga ang inuna namin. Kasi yung gamit, pwede naman mapalitan yan yung mga anak po talaga namin, ang inuna namin. Kaya, nung time po nung nasa loob na po ng bahay namin yung baha, umakyat na po kami lahat sa bubong. Hanggang sa humingi pa ako ng tulong sa teacher ng anak ko na ma'am baka ho pwedeng makisuyo po kami na baka ma-rescue po. Yung kapatid ko pong naiwan, may 4 ko pong bata doon. Palipat-lipat po sila ng bubong kasi yung bahay po namin na tinitiran, lubog na po talaga. Wala na. Lahat po ng gamit namin inanod na, wala na po.
Authorities warned of landslides and potentially deadly storm surges along the coast. Heavy rain effectively shut down Manila, the sprawling capital of 12 million people, and surrounding areas, turning streets into rivers. An official from the country's Office of Civil Defense said rainfall dumped by Vanuatu so far was near the volume during Ondoy, warning flooding could worsen as runoff from nearby mountains flowed into already swollen waterways. The Philippine Red Cross, meanwhile, police, military, and other rescuers used boats to reach people stranded in their homes in Marikina City, one of the hardest hit areas of the capital, where the water in some streets was up to shoulder height. At least 2 people died and 4 others were missing in Camarines Norte province. According to Civil Defense, in its latest update, 8 had been injured.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Thursday assured that the national government will provide relief, rescue, and assistance to families severely affected by Typhoon Ulysses, adding that no one will be left behind. In an address to the nation, the president said local and national government agencies have been mobilized to respond to the situation on ground. Watch this.
My countrymen, mga kababayan, while we are facing the heavy downpour and strong winds of Ulysses, I assure everyone that your government is on top of the situation. From the beginning, various government agencies have already been mobilized to respond to the situation on the ground. I renew my call on all local government units and concerned agencies to ensure that the well-being and safety of our people remain the top priority. As President, I guarantee you that your government will do its best to provide assistance in the form of shelters, relief goods, financial aid, and post-disaster counseling. Rest assured, the government will not leave anybody behind. We will get through this crisis, I assure you. So yan, as soon as I am able to move around, ganito kasi yan ang problema ko. Binabawalan ako ng nagbabantay sa akin, PSG lahat, doktor. Hindi ako makalabas. Sabi ko naman, gusto kong magpakita sa tao lang man. Ang sabi nila nga, bantayan yung yung pagkatao ko kasi ako yung presidente. Sabi ko hindi na bale. Total, meron namang vice president. Kaya nga meron niyang posisyon na yan ang sabi naman marami ho ang opisyal sa labas. Isa lang ang presidente. Gusto ko kung sabihin mo lang as a concern for buhay o kapakanan, wala ako dyan. Gusto kong lumabas. Gusto kong lumangoy. Matagal na ako hindi naligo Kaya lang, ayaw nitong mga sundalo. Sila ang ayaw gustong maligo. Ibig sabihin. So, ganun ang sitwasyon. It's not that I am at a distance from you. Na may distansya ako ngayon sa inyo. Gusto kong pumunta doon. Makipaglangoy nga sa inyo.
He explained that he had to temporarily leave the ongoing video conference of the 37th ASEAN Summit to monitor the disaster situation. Duterte said he personally wanted to leave Malacanang Palace to see firsthand the extent of damage of the typhoon, but his detailed security prevented him from doing so. To date, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the Philippine National Police already deployed 3,261 search and rescue personnel in anticipation of Typhoon Ulysses. Philippine Coast Guard personnel, he said, were deployed in various areas such as in Cavite, Manila, Marikina, Montalban, and Rodriguez in Rizal to aid local government units in their respective rescue and relief operations. Roque said the Department of Social Welfare and Development Central Office, field offices, and National Resource Operations Center have more than 800 million pesos worth of stockpiles and standby funds. He noted that standby funds of more than 226 million pesos are available, with more than 184 million pesos for Quick Response Fund.
Now, despite his hectic schedule due to the ongoing virtual plenary session of the 37th ASEAN Summit, President Duterte conducted an aerial inspection of the areas hit by Typhoon Ulysses. Now, Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo shared with the media the footage and photos of him and the president as they inspected the flooded areas of Marikina City and Montalban and Rodriguez in Rizal at about 3 in the afternoon. Senator Go told the media that the president has directed the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard to mobilize all their assets to rescue residents trapped by massive flooding. A footage showed several houses still submerged in flood in Marikina City. Before the aerial inspection, President Duterte addressed the nation and assured that the government is on top of the situation. He also said the national government would provide relief, rescue, and assistance to families severely affected by Ulysses. He also said nobody would be left behind, as we heard earlier, as the government is ready to address the people's needs. On Thursday morning, the president delivered a message during the 37th ASEAN Summit plenary session, but had to temporarily leave the video conference to monitor the typhoon situation and the government response.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines has dispatched all of its disaster response units to areas affected by Typhoon Ulysses to help LGUs in aiding people severely affected by the weather disturbance. AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay said in a statement that the AFP is also monitoring the situation along the Marikina River that is experiencing heavy flooding due to intense rains brought by the typhoon. Also on hand were 2 disaster response units composed of 3 teams from the 7th Civil Relations Group, 101st Search and Rescue Volunteers, and REACT PH volunteers who were deployed to Marikina City at 6:30 a.m. In affected areas of the Bicol and Southern Tagalog regions, a total of 126 disaster response units with more than 1,000 trained and equipped personnel, 150 mobility assets, 7 rubber boats, and 6 air assets were dedicated to humanitarian and disaster response operations. In Rizal, particularly in the municipalities of San Mateo and Rodriguez, Gapay said 2 water search and rescue teams from the 525th Engineering and Construction Brigade were assisting the LGUs in rescuing residents affected by heavy flooding. They will be augmented by 2 teams from Cavite, he said, noting that search and rescue helicopters were also on standby for deployment to Marikina and Rizal as soon as the weather permits. He said, meanwhile, the Northern Luzon Command is conducting clearing operations in Ilocos Norte, particularly in Pagudpud, due to multiple landslide incidents. No casualties were reported in these incidents. He also appealed to residents in these areas to heed calls for preemptive evacuation and cooperate with government units for their safety.
The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, on Thursday announced that 363 national search and rescue teams have been deployed to help local government units severely affected by flooding caused by Typhoon Ulysses. In an online press conference, Mark Timbal, NDRRMC spokesperson, clarified that these personnel will not take over the rescue operations or response of the affected LGUs. He added, though, that these teams were instructed to report to the mayors of the affected LGUs so that they can be given instructions or assigned particular locations to do their work. Services who contributed these rescue personnel are the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Bureau of Fire Protection, the Philippine National Police, the Philippine Coast Guard, and the Joint Task Force National Capital Region. Mr. Timbal also said teams deployed by the AFP number around 45, with those at standby at 24, BFP with 43 teams, while the PNP has contributed 250 teams with another 253 on standby. Meanwhile, the Philippine Coast Guard has 20 teams deployed with 5 teams on standby, while the JTF NCR has 5 teams on duty. Timbal said the number of deployed teams in affected areas total 363, or more than 1,000 search and rescue personnel, while those 282 teams are on standby and are ready to act as their relievers. He added that these national search and rescue teams are deployed in Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Mimaropa, Bicol, Cordillera Administrative Region, and the National Capital Region. Meanwhile, standby teams are tapped to go into priority LGUs of Rodriguez and San Mateo, both in Rizal and in the cities of Marikina and Pasig, to augment the rescue efforts. Timbal added that the NDRRMC has received more than 90 requests for search and rescue assistance, and these are now being processed with the help of the rescue teams themselves and in coordination with the LGUs.
Meralco spokesperson Joe Zaldariaga said it will take some days before electricity will be fully restored in areas served by the Manila Electric Corporation after its energy infrastructure were damaged by Typhoon Ulysses. Zaldariaga said the power distribution firm incurred extensive damage due to Ulysses. As of 2 p.m. Thursday, a total of 1,575,687 Meralco customers were out of electricity. This has improved from the 3.8 million customers affected around 5 a.m. Meralco said it has already dispatched crews in different or affected areas so electricity service can be brought back gradually, primarily in areas that are already safe to do restoration works. Meralco nevertheless cautioned customers that it will reinstate power supply to homes and businesses but with safety of its workers as well as the consumers being its prime consideration.
Now, President Duterte on Thursday emphasized the need to urgently address climate change, noting that the successive typhoons in the Philippines should serve as a reminder that it should be taken seriously. In a speech during the virtual 37th ASEAN Summit, the President recalled how Super Typhoon Rolly, international name Goni, ravaged many parts of the country despite interventions made by both local and national governments. Take a look.
Developed countries. Your Majesty, Excellencies, more than 2 weeks ago, the Philippines was battered by Typhoon Goni. And if I must tell you, we are now suffering in the midst of the storm of Typhoon Ulysses. There's great damage, and I may not be around to attend further in this regard, for I have to go around and see what I can do for my people. With the timely disaster preparedness measures, we were able to save many lives, but the typhoon left a trail of destruction, infrastructure, and property. This represents a setback of a development agenda, particularly in the affected regions. This calamity is yet another stark reminder of the urgency of collective action to combat the effects of climate change. We must further enhance our cooperation on the disaster risk reduction management to reinforce our capacities both at the national and regional levels. More importantly, we must amplify our voices to demand climate change from those most responsible for the existential challenge we face today. Developed countries must lead in deep and drastic cuts in carbon emissions. They must act now, or it will be too late. Or, if I may say, addedly, it is too late.
Last September, President Duterte urged parties of the Paris Agreement to honor their commitment to climate change. He also said climate change must be addressed with the same urgency as the coronavirus disease pandemic. In 2017, President Duterte signed the Paris Agreement, which aims to reduce the emission of gases that contribute to global warming.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte also emphasized the need for a people-centered approach in mitigating the impact of the prevailing coronavirus disease and this pandemic. In his speech during the plenary session of the 37th ASEAN Summit video conference, Duterte reminded fellow heads of states that achieving a delicate balance between saving lives while keeping the economy afloat should be each government's priority. Watch this.
Pandemic is a defining challenge of our generation over the year. We strove to achieve a delicate balance of saving lives while keeping our economies afloat. We are now confronted with the complexity of enormity of recovering processes. We aim for a comprehensive recovery to build back better, healthier, and more prosperous societies. Our immediate priority is health security. We have to strengthen the health system by ensuring the unimpeded supply of medical supplies and technologies, and by enhancing early warning system for health emergencies. We must work together to ensure that all nations, rich or poor, will have access to safe vaccines. No one is safe until all of us are safe. The massive displacement of workers, including migrant workers, compels us to upskill and reskill our labor force. We must equip our people for the rapidly evolving labor market under the new normal.
The 37th ASEAN Summit and related summits chaired by Vietnam will focus on the theme Cohesive and Responsive ASEAN. The summit is expected to adopt more than 10 outcome documents on ASEAN cooperation on COVID-19, enhancing preparedness for public health emergencies, and updates on ASEAN community building efforts, among others.
So the President Duterte delivered his speech during the virtual plenary session on the 37th ASEAN Summit. And the President emphasized the need to fast-track a code of conduct in the South China Sea to promote peace and stability in the busy waterway. Take a look.
As I have said before, the South China Sea is the ASEAN strategic challenge. How we deal with this matter lays bare our strengths and weaknesses as a community. We must act with haste. The Philippine position is clear and firm. We must solve the dispute peacefully and in accordance with international law, including UNCLOS. The 2016 arbitral award of the South China Sea is an authoritative interpretation of the application of UNCLOS. It is now part of international law, and its significance cannot be diminished nor ignored by any country, however big and powerful. The Philippines is one with ASEAN in transforming South China Sea into a sea of peace and prosperity for all. We are committed to the immediate conclusion of a substantive and effective code of conduct in the South China Sea. And if I may add, it has been a long time, and it is a long wait.
Các nước thành viên ASEAN và các đối tác, thưa quý vị đại biểu, những tình cảm ấm áp về tình đoàn kết.
Vietnam kicks off online ASEAN Summit with an opening ceremony as 15 Asia-Pacific nations are set to sign an enormous free trade deal, with the pact seen as a coup for China in extending its influence across the region. Watch this.
Chúng ta cũng sẽ chính thức kết thúc đàm phán và ký kết hiệp định đối tác kinh tế toàn diện khu vực RCEP, khẳng định quyết tâm mạnh mẽ về tự do hóa thương mại và liên kết của ASEAN với các đối tác. ASEAN cũng đã thể hiện nhất quán lập trường nguyên tắc và cam kết mạnh mẽ xây dựng Biển Đông, nơi có tuyến hàng hải huyết mạch của khu vực và toàn cầu, trở thành vùng biển hòa bình và ổn định, an ninh và an toàn cho tự do lưu chuyển hàng hóa, nơi mà khác biệt tranh chấp được giải quyết bằng các biện pháp hòa bình, nơi pháp luật được tôn trọng, tuân thủ các giá trị chung được khẳng định.
Người dân ASEAN đang trông đợi ở quý vị lãnh đạo các quốc gia đề ra những biện pháp hợp tác hiệu quả và quyết liệt hơn nữa để kiểm soát tốt các làn sóng lây nhiễm mới, đồng thời duy trì các hoạt động và cùng các doanh nghiệp vực dậy nền kinh tế, hỗ trợ ổn định cuộc sống, cảm ấm áp về tình đoàn kết.
Rajiv Biswas, Asia-Pacific chief economist at global business consultancy IHS Markit, said RCEP, or RCEP, will be the world's biggest free trade area measured in terms of GDP. The pact's expected signing comes as the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations fight to mitigate the crippling cost of the coronavirus, which has ravaged their economies and left many battling a severe public health crisis. The pact is also seen as a mechanism for China to draft the rules of Asia-Pacific trade following years of U.S. retreat under President Donald Trump. While the region waits to see how its relationship with the U.S. will unfold, it is battling several other thorny issues, including disputes over the South China Sea. The flashpoint waters, claimed in their entirety by Beijing, but also contested by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan, will also be on the agenda at the summit. But as several nations battle coronavirus outbreaks and with many promised priority access to Chinese-made vaccines, a stand against Beijing is seen as unlikely. Instead, the focus will be on economic development in the bloc, with many of its tourism and export-reliant countries suffering badly. Once signed, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership will be the world's largest trade pact in terms of GDP, according to analysts. The pact, which was first proposed in 2012 and viewed as a Chinese-led rival to a now-defunct U.S. trade initiative, loops in 10 Southeast Asian economies, along with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia.
Eagle News will be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Canreef Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Skyway Stages 1 and 2, the elevated toll road system project, run from a section of the South Luzon Expressway from Alabang to Magallanes, Makati. The Skyway Stage 3 is an elevated expressway connecting the South Luzon Expressway through the existing Skyway Stages 1 and 2 to the North Luzon Expressway via Balintawak. Skyway Stage 4 is an 80-kilometer mixed elevated and at-grade toll road that will connect the existing Skyway system, starting from the FTI section all the way to Bulacan.
U.S. President-elect Joe Biden pressed on ahead with his transition despite President Trump's refusal to acknowledge defeat, naming a seasoned Democratic operative as chief of staff in his first public White House personnel choice. Biden appointed Ron Klain as White House chief of staff. The office of the president-elect said in a written statement of Biden's longtime aide, Klain will work to build a diverse, experienced, and talented team to help President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris meet the urgent challenges facing the country. Additional top-level White House positions are expected to be named soon, according to sources familiar with the plans. CNBC reports that these will include longtime Biden advisors like Bruce Reed and Steve Ricchetti, who both also served as Mr. Biden's chiefs of staff while he served as vice president, along with top campaign strategist Mike Donilon.
U.S. President Donald Trump visits Arlington National Cemetery for a sunbirth wreath-laying ceremony to mark Veterans Day, making his first official post-election appearance for what should have been a moment of national unity, now marred by his refusal to acknowledge Joe Biden's win. On a rainy, gray day in Washington, the president visited Arlington National Cemetery for a somber wreath-laying ceremony shortly before 11:30 a.m. local time, 4 days after U.S. media projected his Democratic rival would take the White House. Since then, he has not addressed the nation other than via Twitter and a statement released to mark Veterans Day, and has not conceded to Biden, as is traditional once a winner is projected in a U.S. vote. Early Wednesday, he was tweeting fresh evidence-free claims of election wins and ballot tampering, despite the consensus from international observers, world leaders, local election officials, and U.S. media that the November 3 vote was free and fair.
Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden and his wife Jill attended their own somber Veterans Day ceremony at the Korean War Memorial in Philadelphia. Since his projected win was announced on Saturday, Biden has addressed the nation, set up a coronavirus task force, spoken with world leaders including Trump allies, and begun vetting potential cabinet members and delivered policy speeches.
Meanwhile, Mr. Trump and his campaign are forging ahead with legal challenges contesting vote counting procedures in several states. The Secretary of State in Georgia, where Mr. Biden leads by roughly 14,000 votes, announced a hand recount of all ballots in the presidential race. The move comes after Republicans in the state pressured him to do more to investigate allegations of impropriety and fraud. Watch this.
With the margin being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in each county. This will help build confidence. It will be an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once. 97 counties have sent their final numbers in. The current margin stands at 14,111 between the President and Senator Biden, Vice President Biden. My office will continue to investigate each and every instance of illegal voting. Double voting, felon voting, people voting out of state. If you report it, we will investigate it. Every legal vote will count.
Joe Biden secured more than the 270 electoral college votes needed to gain the presidency on Saturday by winning Pennsylvania after 4 tense days of counting, delayed by a surge in mail-in ballots due to the coronavirus pandemic. Adding Georgia would add to Biden's margin of victory.
Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs advised the Filipino community in Saudi Arabia to remain vigilant after an explosion during a World War I commemoration in Jeddah injured 2. Now, the DFA, through the Philippine Consulate General in Jeddah, is closely monitoring the evolving situation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in light of the reported blast at a World War I commemoration ceremony held at a cemetery in the Al Balad area of Jeddah. It said in a statement, the PCG in Jeddah has been in touch with Filipino community members who were asked to stay alert and follow the advice of local authorities. Local reports said an explosive device hit the international ceremony attended by representatives of various foreign diplomatic missions. The state media, Saudi press agency, said investigations are underway on what it described as a failed and cowardly attack in Jeddah. It also assured that the 2 injured are receiving high-level medical care.
In other news, China warned Thursday the mass resignations of pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong were a blatant challenge to its authority over the city. 15 legislators were set to quit the chamber in protest at the Beijing sanction ousting of 4 colleagues, leaving the assembly a muted gathering of government loyalists. The resignations came with the city's beleaguered pro-democracy movement and avenues of dissent already under sustained attack since Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law this year. Half of the group had made good on their pledge by Thursday afternoon, which sparked a furious response from Beijing's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. Watch this.
Well, we all know that the central government, the Beijing government, can always say their ruling is all the time right because they have the ultimate jurisdiction over Hong Kong. But the point is whether or not the Beijing government is really respect basic law. And from our point of view, it's clear that Beijing government does not respect basic law. Well, first of all, I want to make it clear that is the central government and the SAR government. They tried, or they in actual fact, take away the separation of power in Hong Kong, which is stipulated by in the basic law. And the key word is the separation of power is a very, very constitutional power that Hong Kong people can enjoy to check and balance the government acts.
The mass departure will leave Hong Kong's legislature with just 43 legislators, 41 of whom belong to the pro-Beijing bloc. This means that the legislature could pass bills favored by Beijing with little opposition. The lawmakers announced their decision to resign hours after the Hong Kong government said it was disqualifying the 4 legislators, Alvin Yeung, Dennis Kwok, Kwok Ka-ki, and Kenneth Leung. The 4 had urged foreign governments to sanction China and Hong Kong as China cracked down on dissent in the city. Beijing accused them of violating their oaths of office.
Meanwhile, the EU on Thursday called on China to immediately reverse new rules on Hong Kong's legislature, which led to the 4 lawmakers being ousted for being seen as insufficiently patriotic. This latest arbitrary decision from Beijing further significantly undermines Hong Kong's autonomy, said EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell in a statement on behalf of the bloc, which also urged the legislators' immediate reinstatement.
Meanwhile, here are the latest developments in the coronavirus crisis. The virus has now claimed at least 1,275,113 lives worldwide since it first emerged in China late last year, and that is according to a Johns Hopkins tally. More than 51,531,660 cases have been registered across the globe. The United States is still the worst affected country with 239,695 deaths, followed by Brazil with 162,829, India with 127,571, Mexico with 95,842, and the UK with 49,770 deaths. Spain's death toll has passed the 40,000 mark, while Italy has passed the milestone of 1 million cases recorded since the beginning of the epidemic, becoming the 10th country to cross that threshold, according to a count by AFP.
Meanwhile, the European Union expressed hope that it could start vaccinating people against the coronavirus as early as next year, as Italy recorded more than 1 million cases, and Britain said its death toll has surpassed the 50,000 mark. Here's the head of the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, Andrea Ammon. Take a look.
I mean, of course, it's promising. And it's a press release and not yet a peer review, so we have to see what the final assessment will be. I mean, the vaccine production has to start after the licensing, and the licensing can only start after the end of the trials. So right now, the trials are still ongoing. Some are further than others. Then this information from the trials has to be sent to the Medicines Agency, and they have to do a review of the information and either license or not. Situation is very, very concerning. Actually, we see that the numbers have been rising since 3.5 months, and all that we have to monitor the severity and the seriousness are going in the wrong direction right now, meaning they are increasing.
U.S. pharma giant Pfizer and Germany's BioNTech have lifted hopes by reporting on Monday that their coronavirus vaccine has shown 90% effectiveness in preliminary results of a trial still underway. The European Commission said it has approved a contract with the 2 groups to purchase up to 300 million doses of their vaccine. The U.S., which has pre-ordered 100 million doses, said vaccinations there could begin before the end of the year. Meanwhile, in Italy, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases passed the symbolic 1 million mark, while almost 43,000 people have died, according to official data.
The Pacific Island nation reports its first case, ending its status as one of the few remaining virus-free countries in the world, and that is Vanuatu. Health officials say a 23-year-old man who recently returned home from the U.S. had tested positive while in quarantine.
South Africa's president again warned of a threat of a second wave as the most affected country in Africa surpasses 20,000 dead. South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa warned against complacency. He also urged citizens to be cautious about gatherings with the festive season coming up next month. To date, South Africa has recorded 742,394 coronavirus cases with 20,011 deaths.
Russia, determined to lead the race, claims its own vaccine Sputnik V is 92% effective. In Brazil, clinical trials of the Chinese-developed CoronaVac vaccine, suspended Monday after the death of a volunteer, are authorized to resume. CoronaVac has been caught up in a messy political battle in the country, where its most visible backer has been a leading opponent of President Jair Bolsonaro. Eagle News International will be back for more. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
This portion is brought to you by Kubert, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical. Also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Kubert, your ultimate NEPS and air conditioning solutions.
What's up? This is Joshua Zamora of The Maneuvers. At kung excited na kayo na maka-witness ang mga world-class dance talent, ito na ang pinakahihintay ninyo. Kaya huwag nyo kami kalimutan sa mas pinalaki, mas pinalawak na talent search on Philippine Television, Tagisan ng Galing Part 2, dito lang sa Net 25.
We know that this is a scary time for all of us.
The coronavirus is changing the world.
Changing our lives.
So please, take care of yourself.
Keep your distance.
Wash your hands.
And if you can, stay at home.
We at DW
are here for you.
We are working tirelessly to keep you informed on all of our platforms.
We're all in this together.
And together,
we'll make it through.
Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Please, stay safe.
Fans may be asked not to cheer at the Tokyo Olympics to avoid the risk of spreading the coronavirus, a top official says. Watch this.
外国人観客につきましては、数も多いし、2週間隔離、公共交通機関の使用といったようなことを条件とすることは現実的でないと いうふうに考えられます。このため、入国前の検査、健康管理、入国時の十分なスクリーニング、入国後の適切な行動管理、健康管理、発症した場合の迅速な対応といった観点から具体的な内容を検討することになりました。大きな声を上げて応援することによる飛沫の拡散というリスクが高まるということがありますので、そういうこともお願いすることになるのではないかということで今検討しているところであります。
The comments follow a gymnastics test event in Tokyo on Sunday where mask-wearing spectators urged not to shout or cheer, confined themselves to polite applause and murmurs of approval. Tokyo 2020 Chief Executive Toshiro Muto said fans arriving in Japan may be spared a mandatory 2-week quarantine, saying it would be too hard to enforce. But he said officials were also considering urging fans not to shout or talk loudly to minimize the risk of COVID-19 infections at the postponed 2020 Games. However, Muto added that the practicality and feasibility of clamping down on cheering needed to be considered. While sports competitions around the world have resumed after shutting down for the pandemic, most are taking place behind closed doors. Fans are allowed at sports events in Japan, usually in limited numbers, but they are advised not to shout and cheer. International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach, who will visit next week on Wednesday, said he was increasingly confident that a reasonable number of fans will be allowed at the Games. Muto also said officials were considering waiving quarantine for arriving fans and replacing it with a series of tests and health checks.
And finally, in our news, in San Antonio, the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ has reached out to give a helping hand to the less fortunate. Eagle News correspondent Stephanie Ward tells us about a generous donation to the city's food bank.
Howdy from Texas. We're here in San Antonio today to see how a local church is supporting its community. As COVID-19 has brought a new season of need for many San Antonio residents, volunteers from the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ conducted an aid to humanity with a focus on organizations like the San Antonio Food Bank, which also relies on community support to assist families struggling with food.
So since the pandemic happened, we automatically saw a double in families who were coming to see us. So we were serving 60,000 folks a week, and automatically, almost overnight, we saw over 120,000 families and individuals who were coming in need of some support. And a vast majority of those who have never needed services before.
My best friend was Ben Gay.
So many people have found themselves in the darkest places of their lives, and there's so many single individuals who are single parent homes who were already on the cusp of poverty. They were working multiple jobs to keep lights on, and finally COVID was that cliff. It was the cliff that pushed that made them choose between medication and food, or lights and food, and that's devastating. So we're so glad that the city of San Antonio believes in us, that y'all believe in us so much, that y'all choose us to bring your donations to. It just means the world to us that y'all trust us with those assets.
Armed with several packages of canned and boxed goods, members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo in San Antonio and Universal City arrived to the food bank with the goal of donating 1,000 pounds worth of food and exceeded it by a total of 1,658 pounds of food.
So we are always glad when folks come together under a mission of feeding the community to come together and bring these pounds for us. That's tremendously important for us. But at the food bank, we kind of think about giving and fundraising in 4 different ways. So we think about food, time, money, and voice. Food is obviously these wonderful donations. Time is volunteering, whether it's in our garden or our warehouse or in our kitchens. But food, time, money, obviously those dollars are really helpful for us, being able to turn $1 into 7 meals. But someone's voice is the last one we really think about. And for me, I always like to emphasize that people's networks and the voice and what they choose to use their voice for speaks volumes about who they are as a person and as an organization. On behalf of Eric Cooper and the 20,000 people we feed each week, Brother Eduardo, thank you so much for using your voice to help those in need, to feed those in need and families and rejuvenate them every day. So the fact that he uses this birthday as an opportunity to put people on these platforms to shout from the rooftops what it means to really give back to the communities. Thank you, thank you. Your congregations are amazing, full of life, and I'm so proud to know them.
In San Antonio, Texas, I'm Stephanie Ward, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Steph.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Please do take care wherever you are. And if you can, to the people of the Philippines, if you can evacuate, if you still have time, please do so already. Don't wait for the flood waters to rise for you to leave and to go to a safe place. Once again, thank you for joining us. Please join us again tomorrow. I'm CJ Hero.
And at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. Take care, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.